Hello, this is Eden from HelixxVR. As many of us have, I've recently received my Oculus Quest. This is not a full review, but I wanted to give my thoughts on it after playing with it for a while. This is not a free unit from Oculus, it was bought and paid for. My Oculus Quest came with about 20% charge. It was enough to complete setup and play around with it briefly, which is always nice. Charging was quite quick too. It took about an hour for a 50% increase. That said, the battery life isn't the best. It seemed to last about 2.5 hours from normal play. You can use an external battery and cable, which doesn't cost much. It's not really ideal though. I found the setup process fairly straightforward, but it would have been nice if a clearer setup guide was provided for less techie people. The onboarding, however, was done really well after the Quest was started up. It clearly explained how to draw the boundaries, use controls and so on. It even had a fun little dancing minigame to help get used to it too and show off the freedom that the Quest allows. A few demos come built in. You can jump straight in and try out the first level of Beat Saber, a boxing game called Creed, and a shooter called Space Pirate Trainer, and there's more. If you own an Oculus Rift and you've been buying from the Oculus store, you may find that some of the games are cross-buy too. Notably, Beat Saber and Supot aren't, but quite a few games are, including Orbis VR, Apex Constructs, Creed, Space Pirate Trainer, and more. So if you bought any of those on the Oculus store for PC VR, you'll have them on the Quest too, and vice versa. It's a developer choice though, so not all developers choose to let you do it. Unfortunately, if you own these titles on Steam instead of the Oculus store, you're out of luck. There's not really any way to detect that you own the game on Steam and let you play it on the Quest, unlike with the Rift. I can understand why, but it still feels like a kick in the teeth after buying the games and playing them on my Rift, then seeing people who did the same get to play on the Quest too. Tracking is always a big worry. It's not quite as good as tracking with external sensors, but it is actually pretty impressive. It can't track out of view of the headset, but it has a fairly wide view. I've had a couple of issues trying to grab something, say where a sword on the hip would be, but generally it's been fine. It can't see things around your back, so this needs to be worked around. Space Pirate Trainer, for example, lets you grab the shield from behind you, but it felt like it was stricter about the position of the controller to grab it than the PC version. In short, it's not perfect, but it is very well done, and when the controls are in view, I didn't notice any drifting or similar. It's much better than the PSVR for tracking, but it's not as good as the Vive or the Rift with room scale. Now, while on the subject of tracking, I'll mention that the controllers look pretty cheap. I'm concerned whether they'll hold up well after time, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who keeps holding them upside down either. They've reversed the ring from the Rift controllers, so it's on the opposite side for the inside-out tracking. So it can get a bit confusing if you're used to the Rift controllers. The headset itself isn't particularly comfortable, I found. It's front heavy and I can't get it tight enough to not move without it feeling too tight. I was playing the Creed demo and it shifted side to side on my face when I moved quickly. I've spoken to a few other people who've said similar things too, so it's not just my head shape or being set up incorrectly. Hopefully people will make some mods to adjust this, as they have for other headsets. The display itself is quite nice. It's an OLED display, so there's no issues with black levels. The resolution is a slight increase over the Vive and Rift. I personally didn't see any SDE without looking carefully. The refresh rate is a drop down to 72Hz, which I've not personally had issues with, but some are more sensitive to. That said, while the display is nice, the graphics of the games shown on the display are a step down when compared to the PC versions. In some games with simple graphics, particularly cartoony ones, this isn't really too noticeable. In games with more detail, it can be very noticeable at times. I can't really imagine them porting something like Vox Machina to the Quest without it looking completely different. The current library of games is pretty limited too, which is understandable for launch. Personally, I found that the majority were titles I'd already played on PC, so I was less excited than newcomers may be. There are some very good titles though. Now, on that note, I am concerned that the Quest specs might put developers off from making titles that require not only better graphics, but just generally more processing power. It might be seen as a safer bet to make lower end titles which can run on the Quest, PSVR, and PC. There are just some things which the Quest would never be able to do without the power of a PC or at least a PlayStation 4 behind it. But of course, the lack of a PC or PlayStation 4 is a huge benefit for the Quest itself. Everything that you need to play room scale VR, and it's cheaper than any other option to do so. This makes VR far more accessible. Now, another huge benefit of the Quest is that it's wireless. While it's possible with the Vive or Rift, it doesn't always work well, and it requires expensive extra equipment. It is incredibly freeing to not have that cable holding you back. Playing active games feels much better. It really helps with taking it around too. You can take it to show off to friends or family, or just to a bigger room away from the PC for more space. One issue worth mentioning only really applies to content creators, streamers, and others who want to show off gameplay for the most part. The support for it is terrible. By default, you can only stream to a personal Facebook page, no Twitch or YouTube. You can record video internally, but the resolution is a square shape. The sound seems to often become desynced or have other issues, and it's been known for the videos to just become corrupt completely. You can cast to your phone or a Chromecast device, but not to smart TVs or anything else which allows casting. There are workarounds for streaming and recording, but they still either give odd resolutions and the fisheye effect, or they require some expensive extra equipment. I've mentioned quite a few negatives, but overall I do really like the Oculus Quest. The price point and standalone nature open up VR to a lot of new people, and we here at HelixxVR want to see VR grow. It's definitely not perfect, but it's worth grabbing one if you don't have the ability to get a PC VR headset. If you do, it's still nice, but there won't be as much for you. This was Eden from HelixxVR. As always, if you enjoyed this, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit that alert button for new video alerts.